What's wild is that I was supposed to start filming this video yesterday, but Max Holloway got knocked out for the first time in his professional career, and I needed a day to just emotionally decompress. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another video. If this is a welcome back, what's up? I hope y'all have been having a good day. If this isn't a welcome back, and this is actually the first time you're on my channel, I know you have a question. Yo, Chris reads? And yeah, I do know how to read, and I still don't have something to say my whole thing to. Allegedly. And today we're going to be doing a wrap up for all of the books I have read in October of 2024. Now, I also want to update y'all on where I am with this channel. Obviously, first and foremost, thank you so much for any of y'all support, whether you're a returning viewer, whether this is your first time coming to my channel. I want to say thank you from the bottom of my soul. Like I said, my dream has been to go to 2 videos a week for a while now. I've just been struggling with making time for this. With that in mind, I want to make sure that y'all are in the loop. So I do want to try and go to 2 videos a week, either starting this video or maybe starting next month. I'm not exactly sure yet, but I want to try and figure out some sort of system to where I can go to 2 videos a week. But with that comes the idea that I kind of am probably not gonna do reading wrap-ups as often as I do. I found myself kind of being in the pattern of making a video about a book and then not fully discussing the book in that video. I think the most egregious form of that was when I was doing my 12 hours of reading video with If We Were Villains. I totally could have talked about that book in that video, and I decided not to because I was going to talk about it in my reading wrap-up. I think I'm probably going to stop doing reading wrap-ups, at least on a monthly basis. I'm probably going to have it be like a quarterly, maybe every bi-yearly basis or something like that. But channel updates are not why you clicked on this video. You clicked on this video because you want to know the books I read this month and whether I would recommend them or not. So let's get started. First and foremost, I want to give a big shout out to 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Cortez. After talking about that book for so much and hearing about it for so long, I finally read it and I really enjoyed it. Or I thought I read it. For whatever reason, it fully skipped my mind. I still have 40 pages to go in that book. I never finished 100 Years of Solitude, but I had started filming the video before I finished the book. So I guess I just, in my head, I was like, oh, the video's out. I guess I finished the book. And then I just completely forgot the book existed. But that's never happened before. And it's like a weird situation, and I feel bad because like I said in the do the hard thing, read the hard book video that I made, I had a really good time. I really enjoyed that book. I guess I just never finished it and it completely left my brain. So even though I have not finished 100 Years of Solitude, I still really enjoyed it so far. I don't know if the ending is going to change that for me, but I still really enjoyed the book. I would still give it 5 stars. I haven't even finished the book, and I would give it 5 stars. So I hope you understand that means I like it a lot. So technically, I didn't read it fully in October, but I'm still gonna count it. So the next 2 books that I read in October, it was kind of like a 2-part thing because I was reading one book and listening to an audiobook at the same time. The book that I read were If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio, and the audiobook that I listened to was Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s by Tom O'Neill. Now, I talked a little bit about my journey with Chaos, the audiobook, in last week's video, so if you haven't seen that, check it out. But I was finally able to finish it. I had 25 minutes left in the audiobook, and my time on Spotify for audiobooks ran out, so I just kept checking it every couple days, and it just let me listen to it literally this morning. So I was really happy I was able to finish it, and I really enjoyed it. Like I said in that video, I went through my own true crime thing, whether it was with mystery books like Sherlock Holmes or with true crime podcasts like Serial. So I very much had a vague understanding and a vague kind of memory of Charles Manson and the Sharon Tate and LaBianca murders. But this book really went into an insane amount of detail on what is, from the outside looking in, a very simple subject. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed how deep into the weeds and how every avenue seemed almost like the answer, kind of like the hook that the author was looking for in order to try and solve this mystery. I can understand how some people, even though the byline does say it's about Charles Manson, the CIA, and the 60s, I can see how some people might walk into this book and be like, oh, this is going to be exclusively about Charles Manson and his whole crew, and then we might have a little background information when it comes to the CIA and kind of what the 60s were like when Charles Manson was running around. What I didn't expect when I was listening to this audiobook was just how deep not just Charles Manson, like his whole circle of terrible people goes, but also how deep into the weeds Tom O'Neill goes and kind of expands from talking about just Charles Manson to essentially how the way the world was in the 60s. So there are large portions of this book, especially in the audiobook, where you're not even talking about Charles Manson for chapters. And again, it was an audiobook, so it was like 45 minutes, the name Charles Manson isn't even said. And I like that because like the more background information and the more stuff that you have that allows you to understand like the main topic better, I think that's better for the reader overall. But I can see how some people might be turned off by that if you were just interested in like Charles Manson and his whole family, as he called it. At the same time, in the 12 hours of reading video, I also read If We Were Villains, like I said, by M.L. Rio, and this book was really interesting. So essentially you follow these 7 students, they're 4th year students that go to this very prestigious school of the arts, and they are actors. They're like theater, Shakespearean actors. And you follow them as they go on their journey through their 4th year and the trials and tribulations that come with just being like theater students and kind of Shakespearean historians, but also the tragedy that happens as they're going through this school year. Now, I didn't mention it in my 12 hours video because I didn't want to spoil it, but there are going to be a lot of spoilers for this book in this video because I gave this book 3 stars, and I can't talk about why I gave it 3 stars without spoiling some things. So big message on screen, editing Chris, go crazy. So Richard is the friend in this group that I forget our main character's name, so he's just going to be main character for right now. Richard, who's kind of like the big tough guy in the group, like he gets all the leading roles all the time, he turns out to be not so good of a person, right? He has a couple incidents with one of the other characters in this friend group, one of the other 7 students, and with our main character, where he becomes incredibly violent, and like at some point like these people are worried about their lives. Eventually, like the tragedy happens, right? About halfway through the book is when this tragedy happens, and the tragedy is that Richard is found drowning on this lake that's right next to like the school. The friend group finds him and he's still alive, right? And I want y'all to think like, yeah, this guy has had some like violent homicidal tendencies, right? But you find this guy who's supposedly your friend and part of your friend group, he's drowning. They're like, oh my God, he's dead, right? No, he's not. One of the friends is like, hey, yo, I think he might still be alive. And then someone begs to ask the question, hey, what if we just let him die? And again, like at this point in the book, Richard, the character who's dying, is not a good person, right? So I understand, like, in a weird way, I understand why this was brought up. But I think you can have that conversation after you get him out of the water. But essentially the friend group has this conversation about whether or not to save him and what story they're going to tell the police and what story they're going to tell everybody and how everyone has to keep their mouth shut while their supposed friend is drowning. And at that point in the book, I was like, all right, like the book has established that this dude is not a good guy, right? So I can understand why his friend group is like, oh, let's just kill him. Let's just let him die. But for me, it required such a jump from, hey, this guy's a bad person and maybe we should talk to like his family, or maybe we should report him to like the campus or like the head chancellor or the police. Instead, they were just like, let's just let him die. So that was a big part of the book that I particularly did not enjoy, right? Secondary, I think our main character's a whiny boy. And I say boy specifically. And this all culminates with like my biggest problem. It's a very noisy chair, I apologize. This all culminates with my biggest problem with the book, right? So eventually, so they let their friend die, right? And everyone in this friend group is like, we're gonna keep the same story. We're gonna tell the police the same story. We're all gonna like hold strong. We're gonna keep like our lie intact that we just found him drowned, right? So the students involved, the 6 other students that were involved in finding their friend that had drowned in the lake, get to take a break from school, right? And they come back. Now at this point, Richard's girlfriend, drowned guy's girlfriend, and our main character, they start canoodling, right? They start doing their own thing. Which is like, bro, like I understand, like you don't get a lot of play in life, right? But you think like the first person you should go to after your friend dies is his girlfriend? You know, like I get it, he was a bad person. But like, come on, bro, like that's just bad. He's just bad vibes all around. So our main character and this girl, they start hooking up, right? And at some point, our main character decides to ask the question that everyone asks when they're in this weird kind of situationship situation, right? And again, I might be getting the timeline wrong, but it has been a period of time in which no matter how much you liked or disliked your partner, like, you would not be okay with, like, if your partner passed away, you would still not be quote unquote over it, right? So they're at this like tavern, this like bar near slash on campus, and our main character and this girl are having this conversation, right? At this point, they've been hooking up for a fat minute, right? Our boy goes, "Hey, so do you like me? Maybe, like, what are we? What are we? Should we be something more?" One of the things I'm really glad the author did in this moment was, obviously, like, the campus knows that their friend passed away, and they're getting a lot of odd looks, our main character and this girl, because everyone knows and everyone gets the vibe that they're hooking up. And this guy, our main character, has the absolute gall to ask this girl, who very publicly had her boyfriend drown on this campus, "What are we?" on the campus bar with everybody listening. So the police found Richard with like a stab wound in his chest, and they knew that somebody had like pushed him into the water, but they didn't know who it was. Turns out it was the friend in this group. Our main character found the bloody like fishing hook, which I don't think it's the right term. Like, it was a big fishing hook, obviously. But he had found the fishing hook in his dorm room, in his friend's dorm room in the college, right? At the same time, another character in the friend group finds out that their friend is the one that killed Richard. So at one of their final plays of their fourth year, very dramatic moment, the police come to arrest this guy, this friend. For whatever reason, for a bunch of reasons, our main character decides to take the fall for his friend and go to jail under the assumption that he was the one who committed the murder of Richard. Wild. It is a wild decision, right? Because at this point, we find out that our main character and this friend had feelings towards each other, right? And they were both men. So you have kind of these very small references. I think it's only referenced like maybe 2 or 3 times that Richard had bullied this other friend for having kind of feelings towards our main character that were more romantic than just friendly, and not doing anything about it, right? Both of these people also had their lives threatened by Richard. So like, I understand why, at this point, like, they kiss. Mwah. Oh my God, it's a very dramatic moment in their friendship, and they start feeling something. But to go to jail, to admit, to falsely admit, so this person that you love doesn't have to go to jail, is such a wild take. And it's such a crazy turn that it didn't take me out of the book. I don't know if I would go that far, but it was it was a wild decision that, to me, like, came out of nowhere. And like, I don't know if that was good, right? Maybe it's the definition of a tragedy, right? That you find someone that you love and that you have feelings towards, and then you want to help them in any way possible. So when you find out that they murder someone, you go to jail for them for 10 years. And then, right? So this entire book is essentially like a flashback, right? Where the beginning of the book is our main character having a conversation with the head detective on the case of who killed Richard, right? Now, when the detective and the police came to arrest the murderer, they knew they were coming for the friend, right? And it was our main character who confessed to the murder, and he knew where the murder weapon was, so they had no choice but to arrest him, right? The main detective was about to retire. I think he had just retired at the beginning of the book. So he's like, "Look, I have no power, I have no authority, I just want to find out what happened." And so our main character tells him. And so they're having this conversation, this whole like telling of what actually happened. And towards the end of the book, you find out that while our main character was in jail for this friend, for this, like, I was going to say lover, but it's not even a lover. They shared a smooch, you know? Main character finds out that his friend offed himself. I don't know how YouTube is with like community guidelines and stuff like that, but he himself while he was in prison. And maybe, like I said earlier, that's like the true definition of tragedy, right? Like, that's the reason that this book is like so heavily inspired by Shakespeare, and there's Shakespeare sonnets and soliloquies and like references and quotes to Shakespeare throughout this entire book. This is the definition of a tragedy, right? You find someone that you love, that you would do anything for, and one of those anythings is going to jail for them for 10 years, only for them to be dead by the time that you make it out, by the time that your 10-year bid is over. It was really hard for me to like feel for the character and to understand what this character was going through when I was still reeling from like 25 pages ago, where this man agreed to go to jail for 10 years because he had feelings towards someone who committed a crime. And I don't want you to think I didn't enjoy this book. I gave this book 3 stars. Like, I enjoyed this book. The writing was really good. I think the way that the environment was built, which I'm slowly starting to realize is a big thing for me. The way the environment was built in this book, was like really well done. And also there were like the character building was really good too. Like there were characters in this friend group that I liked more than our main character. Really didn't like our main character, and a lot of the decisions made by our main character I didn't really enjoy, and whether that was intentional or not, I guess, is up to the reader and the author, but I didn't like our main character in general. And also the final part of the book, right? So this man's been in jail for 10 years. He finds out that the person that he went to jail for is dead by the time he makes it out, right? He's reeling with this. He's staying with one of the friends in New York while he's trying to get his life back together. And it turns out that before his friend offed himself because he couldn't live with the guilt of someone taking the fall for him and going to prison, he left him a letter. And in the letter is a Shakespeare quote. I'll put it up on screen so y'all can read it. So essentially it's an excerpt from a Shakespeare play, a Shakespeare writing, where the person delivering this soliloquy, this little speech, essentially faked their death. And so the ending of the book, and it talks about it in like the reading notes or the questions for reading towards the end of like the physical copy of the book, talks about how like the ending of the book was intentionally vague, right? So right before this character passes away, they write this letter to the person that took the fall for them, saying, or quoting, I should say, from a character that faked their own death, right? And I felt like that was just so unnecessary. Like the whole reason that this character offed themselves, right, was because they couldn't deal with the guilt. They couldn't deal with knowing that someone else they couldn't deal with the knowledge that they killed someone, first and foremost. But they also couldn't deal with the knowledge that someone had gone to jail for them because they loved them so much, right? And for this character and for the author to say, hey, this character feels so bad about what happened that they are going to commit like the ultimate hurt and they're going to off themselves, right? So to kind of, maybe this isn't the right term for it, but to kind of go back on that and leave like an intentionally vague final message saying that you might have faked your death. Like what reason would he have to maybe fake his death? Like I felt like as a reader, I felt like I was cheated out of a good book, and I'm talking myself into giving this book 2 stars. I think I'm going to leave it at 3, but like the end, like why? If y'all have read If We Were Villains, and if y'all enjoyed it, please leave a comment down below, because like thinking about it and speaking about it now is really like, I'm only confusing myself more. So let's stop worrying about Shakespeare for a bit and go on to my next book, which is Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. So I initially read this book because I was trying to do essentially like another 12 hours of reading video, and I ended up not liking the way it came out, so I ended up not releasing the video, but I still read the book and I wanted to talk about it. My main issue with this book, and I remember that I mentioned this in a couple other videos, was that I had tried reading the beginning of this book probably like 3 or 4 times. And the book starts out with Phil Knight kind of as he has the very inklings for starting a shoe company, right? And you're following him like post-college graduate as he's like traveling the world and trying to find himself and trying to figure out how he wants to live his life before he starts making this shoe company. Now, that was like 2 sentences of what the beginning of this book was. What it actually was in this book, out of the 386 pages in this book, was probably like 75 pages of that, right? I felt like that was my main issue with this book, is that it felt like it was trying to be 2 books at once, right? It was trying to be like the motivational, like maybe not self-help, but just motivational book on what it takes to start a business. And then the other half was the creation of Nike as a brand and of Phil Knight and how Nike became from, you know, just a guy selling shoes out of his car to Blue Ribbon Sports to Nike Incorporated to what Nike is today, right? And me personally, I was a lot more interested in how Nike came to be than I was in how Phil Knight himself came to be, if that makes sense. I just felt like I came into this book, and especially with how hard the first like 50, 75 pages were for me to get through, I think I came into this book expecting something that was more of a history of Nike. And like the byline of this is a memoir from the creator of Nike, right? So maybe I just didn't read the byline. Maybe I should have judged the book by its cover. But I think I was more interested in that. I think I was more interested in the history and the creation of Nike and like the information that you can get from like a creator and a founder of like a multi-billion-dollar and like multi-nation company that Nike is now. And I was a lot less interested in like the trials and tribulations that like Phil Knight himself went through when it came to building the business. I understand that a lot of the times those two things intersect, right? The things that Phil Knight was going through and the things that he was learning about himself and about the world and his worldview obviously like impacted how he chose to run and create Blue Ribbon Sports and eventually Nike. But like I said, I still gave this book 5 stars. I think it was still an enjoyable read. I think if you're okay with kind of like the memoir, like motivational, like inspiring Phil Knight story, if you're okay with that, then this is going to be a really good book for you. As much as I love a multi-billion-dollar corporation, like I love not even thinking about giving my money to small businesses and just giving it to corporations that have more money than they know what to do with, right? It is like a hobby of mine. But we're going to stop talking about that and start talking about Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. If you haven't seen my video of me reading Brave New World, I'll have it linked somewhere up here if you haven't seen it already. It was one of my favorite videos to film so far, and I talk a lot about my views on the book in that video, and that video was kind of like the main reason, isn't maybe the right word, like main like catalyst is a better word, for me not wanting to do monthly reading wrap-ups anymore, because I feel like I explained myself pretty good in that video already. So I'm just gonna kind of breeze through my explanation of this. If you want to get like a more detailed, insightful view, you can watch that. And I think in future videos, when I'm reading 1 or 2 books in a video, I will have like a very in-depth kind of explanation and review, for lack of a better term, in that video, instead of saving my thoughts for like a monthly reading wrap-up. But with that said, I'll kind of summarize everything I said in that video about this book. I do believe, I could be mistaken, I think in the video I gave it 3 stars. I have since, in thinking about it, I have since lowered it to 2 stars. And the reason I did that was because I cared so much about the environment of this book, right? Like I really was interested in the world that Aldous Huxley created and kind of the daily going-ons and the daily happenings and things like that. And I was far less worried about our main characters and what they were going through. I mentioned in the Brave New World video that my favorite part in this book was 2 chapters towards the very end, where our main characters and this guy named Mustafa Mond, who's known as the controller, who's like essentially the president, the governor of this neighborhood, of this city that our characters live in. And they have this conversation for these 2 chapters back and forth on just the world building and the environment and why the status quo is the status quo and why this world is the way that it is and why it can or cannot change, right? But I just didn't want to hear about them. And no disrespect to the writing, because I think the writing of this book was very good and it was very easy to get through. I don't think this is one of those books where like the metaphors are so old or so difficult to read, excuse me, and the writing is like so old English that it's like a struggle to get through. Like this was a pretty easy read, all things considered. And again, there's the conversation to be had about like how much is the environment influencing these people versus how much these people and the problems and the issues that they're going through are influencing their environment, right? But I just felt like those last 2 chapters where our characters were talking to Mustafa Mond were so fun, for lack of, like, not even fun isn't the right word. It was just so interesting and informative, and it really made you think, like, past, there's a fly again. Ah, got it, let's go. It really made you think about, like, the world and like what you had been reading for the past like 200 pages up to this point. Like it just really made you think. I ranted a lot about If We Were Villains and I ranted a lot about Shoe Dog, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, especially when I dedicated a whole video to this book. But I really loved the environment and I really love Aldous Huxley's way of relating the environment back to our characters and like not even saying it outright, but mentioning just all of the things that are set up to make our characters like feel the way that they feel and talk the way that they talked and react the way that they react. When I started thinking about it and realized that like 70-80% of this book was about the main characters and it was the parts of the book that I enjoyed the least. So, you know, maybe I'm in the minority here. Looking at Storygraphs right now and it has a 3.77. Obviously I'm below that with a 2. But I do think if you've never read this book before, that classics are classics for a reason, and they deserve to be read even if you DNF them, even if you don't like them. Like I said in my 100 Years of Solitude video, just read it, just do the hard thing and read the book. And of course, like I'm getting better at it. You can always DNF a book if you don't like it. but I didn't have the best experience with Brave New World, but I still enjoyed it, and I still think there's something enjoyable there for everybody, whether you're an environment person like me, whether you're a character person like me, or maybe you just love classic lit and you want to like increase the classics that you've read. I still think this book is worth reading, even though I didn't give it like the best rating. But that's going to be it, I think, for October's reading wrap up. Looking at it now, I read 1, 2, 3, 4 books in October, which is a little low. I think technically 5 because of 100 Years of Solitude, even though I technically didn't finish it. But I think 5 books, 4.5, we'll say 4.5 books. 4.5 books I think is pretty good for me in a month. If you like this video or anything I said at all in this video, please leave a like, leave a comment down below. Let me know if you agree with any of my takes on any of the books I talked about, or you disagreed with some of my takes specifically. If you disagreed on some of my takes, maybe there's like an avenue or a way of thinking that I didn't recognize or that I didn't consider when it came to any of the books or any of the parts of these books that I didn't like. Leave a comment down below, and also let me know how many books you read in October, and if you liked what I'm talking about and you like me as a person and you think I'm handsome and cute and you like any of the other videos that I've posted, please leave a subscribe. It really helps out a lot. I've been putting in, like I said, a lot more effort, or trying to put in a lot more effort into these videos, and a subscribe really just lets me know that you guys are liking what I'm putting out. So if you are liking what I'm putting out, hit that subscribe button. You'll get notified every time that I upload a video. And I think that's going to be it. A little sneak preview for some of y'all that made it this far. I think next week's video is going to be me reading Pimp by Iceberg Slim, and then eventually building my way to The Anatomy of Violence so we can finish these quote-unquote shorter books that I still have on my physical TBR. But for real this time, that's going to be it, and I'll catch y'all next time. Thanks for watching. Peace.